Good day, good people. Welcome to Daily Border Crossings. This is the second show of our second season, and you are in for a treat. I've been excited all day about this special guest. So I first heard about Dr. Gholdy Muhammad when I was doing a fellowship with Scholastic. They told me about her book, Cultivating Genius, and talked about doing trainings based on the content. And they said, surely you know Gholdy Muhammad. And I said, I do not. And they were like stunned. How could you know? I'm like, I don't know. But you guys have piqued my interest, so I will find out. So I Googled my guest and I listened to some of her interviews and read articles written about her. And then I read quotes and things that she wrote. And then I learned that she has this curriculum framework with these 5 pursuits, one of which is joy. And I was like, who is adding joy to curriculum? Like, who is doing this? Like an added actual part that's written in there. And then I saw her at, I was working for Boston Public Schools this summer, and I saw her at a Boston Public Schools Professional Development Day. And out of all those things I was reading and hearing and seeing, I thought to myself, who is this awesome person that's saying so many of the things I've said in the past years with this added twist on how she's doing it and with this awesome platform? And I felt like we were speaking the same language. And I was like, I have to get to know this person. She should be my new friend. And so I'm honored to welcome to the show and to introduce to some and reintroduce to others, the brilliant, engaging author and educator, Dr. Gholdy Muhammad. Dr. Gholdy Muhammad, welcome to the show.
Thank you. I'm so glad for your joy and your energy and for being here with you.
What should I call you? Should I call you Dr. Muhammad? I know we work hard for our degrees and all of that.
You call me Gholdy.
I can call you Gholdy. Okay.
Yes.
All right. I'm going to pin us both so that we are both here on the screen. Okay. So how was your Thanksgiving? Did you get to spend time with family, friends?
Yeah, I spent time with family, and it was nice to have some time to rest, to reflect, to think. And I did some writing. I did some wonderful writing over the time. And I cooked, it was good. That's always a win. So yeah, it was a good time to be with those you love.
Yeah. So you cooked like Thanksgiving stuff?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, what'd you make?
I made dressing.
Oh, that was a whole thing with my family this year. People were doing dressing recipes. It was not, my husband was like, when we drove back, he was like, so everybody made dressing, but they all tasted the same? Like what?
It was rare that they all taste the same. Unless they use the same recipe or something, but yeah, weird. But you know, like potato salad, mac and cheese.
Yes, yeah. Mac and cheese this year.
We had what else? I just had a plate right before, so I feel like I should know what I just ate. Greens, of course, you know, all the staples.
Right. Did you make a lot of those things?
Huh?
Did you make a number of those things?
Yeah, like I made enough. It's a lot left over.
I thought you made like one dish that was a contribution. You meant like you cooked multiple dishes.
Yeah. That's the first time I did that. Usually I just, you know, people just bring me food.
Right.
This year was different.
Okay. All right. So what are you up to these days? So you recently started at the University of Illinois, right? Chicago? Is that like from Georgia State?
That's where I finished my graduate degree.
That's what I thought. I thought I read that.
Mm-hmm. And then I had a position as an assistant professor, which I got tenured at Georgia State University in Atlanta. And now, as since August, I'm back at UIC now as an associate professor.
Oh, okay. So was that how long were you in Atlanta?
I think it was like 8 or 9 years.
So what is this like? Like from Atlanta to Chicago, weather-wise, culture-wise, how's the move?
Chicago's a great city, and I'm from the area, so
That's where you're
it,
from.
yeah, I'm from Gary, Indiana, and I grew up around Chicago. So, it's not, and I lived in Chicago before, and so it's not like a big shock in terms of weather or
Okay.
culture. Atlanta was a cool space. It took some getting used to because I was used to a lot of fast paced, more city
Yep.
like, and then it kind of, was at a different pace when I moved there. But, I had a great experience at Georgia State. I love the people in Atlanta, and I had family there. I have family here too. And yeah, I think if folks can get past the cold weather in Chicago, it's a great city.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Lots to do,
I'm
lots to
from
see.
South Carolina, but I lived in Georgia before I came. So I love Atlanta.
Yeah,
But it's
Atlanta's
definitely a
cool.
different pace.
Yeah. I don't know. I'm
Um,
just happy wherever I am.
what'd you say?
I said I'm learning to be happy wherever I am.
Oh, there you go. Right. That's the
Mhm.
best way to be. All right. So as we get into this, I was wondering, I saw this thing last night. The Soul Train Awards. Did you happen to see the Jasmine Sullivan part?
I didn't. I saw, it's funny. I was listening to some music in between meetings and work. And you know how, you know what? I was listening to DeBarge and Switch on YouTube. And
Okay.
for some reason, the next video comes up, the intro to the beat. I didn't even know the BT Awards were on. I missed
Listen, me
all of
neither.
that. I missed the
Soul Train Awards. I didn't either.
Soul Train. Well, right, the Soul Train Awards on BT. And so I saw the intro, when they came and did their thing. And I think because El DeBarge had that part, you remember that part where he sang at the beginning? I think that's
Yes.
why it gave me that video next. Anyway.
No,
And
I only
what happened with Jasmine Sullivan?
So I'm gonna see if I can find that. I didn't see most of it. I saw like what you're talking about, and I saw the regular host down, Gina and Pam. I know that's not the real names, but that's what made them household names. So just Tisha Campbell and Tachina Arnold opening up with offering their humor and all of that. I saw Ashanti because I was flipping. There a game with the football game was on, and I was just working. But I saw Ashanti, aka Benjamin Button. I feel like she's like this sis keeps aging backwards. But what touched me was Jasmine Sullivan's speech. I'm gonna share it with you.
Okay.
Because it was so I thought about Black women and I thought about talking to you today.
Oh.
So I thought about that because because I was thinking about for me personally, I have some little silver strands that is what I call them. That I definitely have a tendency to not be proud about, right? Like, and it's just like comes with age, right? Little quote unquote gray, I called them my silver strands. But then I reminded myself that they represent wisdom for me, right? And then I was thinking about a lot of people that know me or listen to my show, I talk about having been at Harvard the past year. And I bring that up often not to brag or boast or whatever about Harvard, but it's an accomplishment that I'm proud of. Being my age and married with 2 elementary children and a job and so on. And God let me get through that year. But I'm glad that I did it for the culture, and I'm here to write recommendations and to let people know that I did it. They can do it too. But I gained a lot of connections and contacts around the world, and gain a lot of knowledge and a lot of wisdom. And I also gained a lot of weight. And so I too would be like, wanting to hide or wanting to whatever, like what she was saying. And she was reminding me that like this body carried me through those times when I was up late writing papers and writing, researching and doing finals and all of that. And her part mentioning about Black women and what they expect of people, and that what made me think about you that I love is that your work is centered in Blackness, right? Like you say, you talk about um, our little brown boys and girls, and you talk about the history of where education came from, and all these things in this ways that, as a person who's been doing DEI, like I've had people come to me and be like, oh, are you going to talk about race again, or are you going to talk about black and white, or are you going to talk about black? And I'm like, did it end? Did black and white racism end? I mean, I feel like, yes, I'm going to talk about that, and I'll talk about the other stuff. I'll include other groups also, but there's a whole both and, right? It's not either or. And I appreciate that, like, it didn't seem to be a compromise, at least in what I've saw. So maybe I need to back up and kind of let you talk about your work and the framework and some of that and where it came from. But I really thought about how that's just one of the things that I loved and appreciated, that it's like, when I listened to you talk about the work that you do, it was stuff that teachers needed to hear, and it didn't seem to be compromised. It was both and, or what I call both and. It wasn't like, let me just not even talk about this at all so that I can talk about other stuff, but let me include everybody. Does this make sense? Like, does that feel like?
Yeah, no, it does. And, first of all, sis, thank you for sharing that clip. I feel like it's through you and other people's where I keep up with what's happening and what's going on.
Yeah.
When I couldn't catch it. But, Jasmine Sullivan is beautiful. And, what she captured in a short time is what Black women and sisters have been for each other and have been saying and feeling for a very long time. My research begins with studying the literacy practices of Black women. How and for what purposes have we engaged in reading, writing, thinking, speaking, listening, and really focus on our writings. How have we written to define ourselves, resist hurt and harm, move towards social change, and for joy, all these things. And, so our beauty and how we defined ourselves and how we would claim and reclaim our own sense of like self and who we are, and even feeling good about ourselves.
Yes.
Was a big part of that history. And, in my dissertation, a lot of my articles in my other book, I write about Black girl literacies and how those historic practices and feelings and emotions of Black women are still within our young Black women and girls today. And, my work started there because there's something beautiful starting your research and work with Black women who have taught me, kept me, informed me, show me how to be. So, you see that a lot show up in my work. And I carried that historicalness of my work, and I studied Black history and Black literary societies and Black literacies to come to a model for teaching and learning that, yes, is useful for all children. Black people were never, we were always for everyone else. We always help everyone else.
Exactly.
And now through my research, I'm seeking to do the same. The thing is, you can take Black historical excellence as a model to be better, no matter who you are, whose you are. And so that's what I'm doing now in my work, like looking back, thinking back, remembering back to our history to understand how can we use this part of history to educate all children more excellently.
Thank you. You mentioned the history piece, and thinking about Black women in literacy, I hadn't put as much thought as you have into like how that began. I did take a class with Henry Louis Gates this year, who was like way nicer and kinder than I ever thought he would be, and relatable and approachable and all that. But one of the things that it was a literature class, and he talked about how Black people, African American people in particular, are the only people who wrote as a means of proving that we could, like how other people got to start writing. And he's speaking specifically with African Americans in this country, after we got here and all of that, and how all these other people could start writing for pleasure or for these different things, but like we had to write to like show that we actually were literate and actually could write. So I appreciate you talking about Black women's literacy. I read this book. I want to show you. I don't know if you can see. In fact, I'm gonna. Do you know this book?
Oh yeah.
Right. In my first graduate program, I'm gonna take this now. You can just see my kid art and stuff. So this book, and it was so good. It's all marked up. The Education of Blacks in the South, 1860 to 1935. And I'm reading this and I'm thinking, it was the College of Education at the University of Maryland had what's called a minority and urban ed division or whatever. And I'm thinking, like, I'm going in like, I don't know everything. I'm Black. I already know all this stuff. Of course I didn't know all this stuff, but so I'm reading and I'm just like, learning all the stuff about how the stuff that I just didn't know, right? Like how the education system started and like how not only instrumental, like how we got the stuff rolling, all the things that we did, considering a lot of the BS, just the total crap that we went through and how we kept pushing. And I'm reading this, I was reading this book and I was getting so excited and, just learning all these different parts and just feeling proud of who I am and just excited about all the things that they were doing to get education started because they wanted to do it for themselves, not even thinking, realizing how big this would be for everybody else. But that's some of what you pull from, right? Like those history pieces. Can you talk a little bit about the history pieces?
Yeah, I mean, it was really in studying, I study one part of history particularly, but of course, like Anderson's work and so many others on, like Black historical education definitely came up in my research and my archival work. And, I studied Black literary societies, which were a type of organized space. They weren't schools. But they were schools. They were schooling each other and teaching each other. And so I would look at all of these different parts of history and I wanted to know what did they do? What did they read? What were some of their goals for learning?
Yeah.
Were they about collectivism, individualism, capitalism, competitiveness? I would look at the things that I see in education today and compare what did our people do? Were they about collectivism and social responsibility, which I found, yes. What did they read, write, and think about? And I found at times they were writing to each other. We wrote a lot to each other to give us comfort and sustainability and to remind each other of who we were. I see that across time. And I do see a lot of writing. It was a lot of resistance writing, but a lot of joy too. Yeah. I read a poem in the 1827 about the flower of friendship. And it's a beautiful poem. And there was nothing about fighting and the resistance. It was just about love. And so that's what my work came to. I started to go deep into the archives and really focus on some of their pursuits or learning goals. And I found that they had those 5 pursuits that you mentioned. As they were learning, they were trying to make a sense of their identity and who they are. They were trying to learn the skills of reading, writing, and mathematics and science. So that they can put themselves in greater positions to have impact and influence on themselves, their community, and maybe the wider world. And they wanted to learn new things through intellectualism. I would see that they would read about international topics in fashion and all sorts of things.
Wow. Was this hard to find? Were you just doing lots of?
It was, but it wasn't. I have to say, once you got into it, I don't know. Some things that gives me much ease. I find I'm learning the older I get that Other people find it difficult, but I didn't feel like I would just go, it would be like a little roadmap, like a treasure hunt. Sometimes I would read something. It just takes diligence and persistence of reading, like researchers do.
Yes.
And so if that's hard, I don't know for you, but something that's so beautiful and joyful felt ease for me.
Yeah.
And so some things were more accessible, like some of the earlier Black newspapers. Some I had to dig into, like, reading rooms and archives where they had like, special collections of libraries. I had to do some traveling, but, I found that they had these wider goals for education more so than we have today. And, they had intellectualism was the third. So there's identity, skills, and intellectualism. They were just learning about all sorts of things that, we think about all the new things we learn about. They were learning about all sorts of things. And I read, like, one time they're reading about international fashion in the 1800s. Thinking about Jasmine Sullivan's beautiful dress she had on. And, they wanted to, the fourth goal was criticality. Now, that's not their language, but I saw that they were resisting and centering anti-racism and resistance in their writing, in their public addresses and things like that. And
were these are teachers, right? Are you reading about, these are all educators that you were reading about?
No, they were literary society members. Literary societies. Let me get to the fifth goal, which was joy, which you mentioned before.
Yes.
Literary societies, if you read about their history, they were organized literacy groups that came together to read, write, and think, much like book clubs do today. But they were reading, they were debating, they were studying mathematics, they were studying science, they were all sorts of issues. It wasn't just like we read a book and talked about it. They were abolitionists. So they were striving to make the world better as they were cultivating their own genius. And they were members, much like sororities and fraternities have, that's an organized membership.
Right.
It was much like that. So before Black literary societies, they had anti-slavery, benevolent societies, moral reform societies. We have a history of organizing as a people.
Yes.
And so whether it is, to organize around a book or around a common thread like a sorority, or around morals or religion, we were always organizing. And so that's what the book is about, is me looking at this part of history through an educational lens.
Okay. See, so I had that part wrong in the sense that, like, I was like, this is even more exciting that, like, you took this literary society and these pieces from it, because I've seen, like I said, I was at the Boston public school thing, and I saw how you showed how you can apply this to math or to science or to social studies. There's ways to apply the framework to anything. It wasn't just like, it wasn't, like you said, you did it basically through an educator lens, which to me is super exciting, because here you have these people, these literary societies that, like, I feel like I wish I knew more about. Now I want to go and learn more about them. But I mistakenly was thinking that it came from researching educators, which, I mean, they were educating, but that's not where it came from.
Yeah. And I don't stay with confined ways of defining a teacher or an educator like we do today. Okay. There are people who I name as teachers who have never been through a teaching ed program. Yes. And they were teachers. They were teaching themselves and each other. Yeah. And so a lot of terms that have been sort of created in the system that we now know as education, I don't use those words. I don't find them to be helpful. And I feel that they're oftentimes pretty small in certain contexts.
Okay. So would you say, in terms of, when I'm listening to you and I'm thinking about all the stuff that you put into Cultivating Genius, which I saw how you just used that in a sentence a few minutes ago, So like it seems when you were doing the research at some point, maybe there was this aha moment where you're like, this is what I'm going to call my book because this is what they're doing.
No, that was that wasn't the name of the book at first. It was just, I think it was something like culturally and historically responsive education, a 4-layered model or something like that. And my editor, Lois Bridges, she said, it's just one word that keeps coming up is genius. And genius, she just kept saying genius. And I said, well, genius was a word they used in their writings. I certainly read a lot about them using genius in the book titles, in their newspaper titles, in their rhetoric. Genius was a very, well-used word around Black people calling themselves geniuses.
Yes.
And so I said, that feels good. And she said, well, I feel like, in this book, you're summoning the genius out of people. And so she says, maybe, we can entitle it Summoning Genius. And I'm like, I like basic titles at that time of this is what it is, boom.
Yeah.
But I listened to her but I didn't like the word summons. It was too connected to Black people not being treated right. And it was too much of like a criminal justice.
Exactly. When I think summons, I'm definitely thinking courthouse.
Yeah. Yeah. And so I remember talking to one of my sisters, Chelsea Cully Love, and a few others. And, we felt like cultivating was a good word, and a few of my other friends. And because, to cultivate something requires work,
right?
Requires digging and watering, something that's already there. And the book is really around this premise is that our children are already genius. It's not simply what they can't do, but what they can do.
You just got to get to it.
Yeah. And it's an action. It felt like a verb that felt meaningful. And, that's kind of how it came across.
Is the book, was that a lot of parts of like what your dissertation was on? Is that the book? Is it related?
Yeah, the model in the book was, I wrote about in my dissertation, but it's like it was my conceptual framework. And I studied the model with, about 6 Black girls in my dissertation. My dissertation is on Black girls connecting Alice Walker's, searching for our mother's gardens. It was in search for a full vision.
Yes.
And it was on Black girls writing. And so that was my conceptual framework that I was also still working with. And then I started that research in graduate school and just kind of kept going. So I think the introduction of the first chapter, was like a paper I wrote in grad school. And, the rest just came.
So that's why I was going to ask you, for people who think about writing books and like who just might have wanted to know about that part of the journey, like what that was, how the book came together. But it sounds like it was through the research.
Yeah. Well, I think, people everyone has to ask themselves, what do I have to say to the world? That comes from Black women. We have always asked ourselves that.
Yep.
And you have to know who you are and what you're writing and what you have to say and how your writing could elevate someone's life. That's what I went through. And I think writers have to understand why they want to do something. You cannot write a book to sell some copies. You have to do it for more authentic, meaningful, to me, purposes. Somebody said, well, did you think that Cultivating Genius would sell so much so fast? I said, I knew it was special. And it was enough because I loved it and my grandmother loved it, and that was enough for me. Anything else is just extra love and toppings on the cake and sprinkles. That's what it felt like for me. And I think people have to study their writing process and know it. I love to write. Writing is like my art. And when it hits me, like, how you read about like Tupac and other people, they would just do the whole album in one sitting.
Yes.
That's how I read.
Okay.
And I never understood it until it has to be something God God, placing on me.
Yep.
And when it comes, it just pours out.
Yeah.
And so, the last few things I've written this week and last week, it felt that same embodiment of something. And then once I'm finished, I'm like, I don't know how I just did that.
Yeah, I definitely understand that feeling. When I did this thing on Black girls, I took a course called Say Her Name. I think I might have shared it with you in like a Twitter message. But it was called Say Her Name, and for the final, you had to talk about something that we had explored, and I wanted to talk about this idea of like how Black women are so important. Centering us helps everybody benefits in the end, but we always keep being erased. Like there's this erasure that happens, and I wanted to explore the difference of that, and I ended up where now I'm like, how did I do that? It's almost a 2-hour thing. That's this multimedia production of all these people I interviewed and all this research I did, and learned about all these women from the civil rights movement who were erased, and ended up interviewing all these people to talk about like, why is this that this happens? And just ended up with this great whole lot of research exploring this juxtaposition of this thing that happens to us. But it hit when it hit, and then I couldn't stop, and then it just kept going. So I certainly understand that. Okay.
Yeah, that's a good feeling.
Say that again.
I said that's a good feeling.
Yeah, it is. It is. You mentioned your grandmother, which led to something else I was going to ask about. Like a lot of the cultivating genius stuff and the stuff that I hear feels like, or listening, a lot of it came from research, but there's something about your delivery of it that seems like it's more than just research. And I'm wondering like who poured into you, and it's like when you go back, like when you, well, I'm picturing like a grandma or an auntie, mom, dad, uncles, because I don't know. I'm picturing some older folks in or around your family. And even now saying like, maybe they're like, look at Gholdy. Like, I'm not surprised. Of course she's doing this, or of course she has all this stuff to say. So I'm wondering who poured into you, and I'm wondering how they're feeling now about like everything that's happening.
I've had a lot of beautiful people pour into me, and I don't even know if they had a choice. Sometimes I've been like this since I was a kid. I would just show up with so much joy and hugs and love. It's like you don't have a choice. But definitely like my grandmother, who just last week turned 95. And she was always a model. It wasn't a lot of times where she may have sat down and talked to me of how to do things, but she sort of, just modeled it in her life: the kindness, the grace, the love for God, the education, the need for education, and humor and laughter. And
I love that about grandmothers. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Black grandma.
Yeah, I mean, I asked her, I said, 95 years, what do you want people to know and remember you by? And she was like, that I was happy and I treated everybody with kindness, even when they did not treat me. And that's a word right there. Because
such a word.
Sometimes, that calls for a lot of humility and purity of the heart, which is very hard to get to. But in addition, like my mothers, my aunties, my sisters, I have 2 older sisters, and my friends who are my sisters, and my best friend, more recently, Yolanda Seeley Ruiz. She pours into me, in ways, she's like a best friend that I want everybody to have. I mean, that's how like special she is.
Did y'all grow up together?
No, she and I met later in life.
Yep.
As I was a grad student, she was an early professor, and we met at a conference. And, she was presenting, and I came up to her and I said, I just want to say thank you. It's a beautiful presentation, and I like the way you speak and how you delivered it. And she said thank you. And later she saw me in the hallway and she gives me her number. And she was like, if you need anything, you call me. And she felt it, like I felt it. And she probably didn't guess, out of all these years later, what she would have been helping me through. I mean, she helped me through a divorce, a 10-year process,
Ooh,
my
that's a lot.
book, my all my writings, my thinking, my presentations. And so she's a beautiful sister. And
Yes.
I have so many, I'm blessed to have so many wonderful teachers I get to work with who pour into me, my students. I pour back, they pour. It's just a pour fest.
um, okay, I'll be wrapping up. Thank you for this time. I only have a couple more. One of the things I was thinking about, this is something that used to frustrate me, and I'm wondering your thoughts. When I was in, I taught for 11 years, and then I just left, and I wanted to do more than what I could do at the classroom and affect change on a greater level. But one of the things that used to frustrate me, I taught at an independent school where it was not a lot of students of color, but the students of color that were there, like, needed to make sure that they were included and felt valued. And I wanted everybody to feel valued. But one of the things that would come up is this idea of buy-in, and sort of like it would be like a number of schools, I guess. There can be kind of this slow incremental change that's going to happen. And sometimes it doesn't happen unless, they're waiting for teacher buy-in, or they're waiting for people to feel ready. And I used to say, but like, why y'all are waiting? These kids out in second grade, they only got 1 year, like, so they're going to be a third, fourth, fifth, and we're still waiting for buy-in, and their life, things are moving. And then, we talked about mandating things versus buy-in. And if you mandate it, people will feel like, well, if you're making me do this, I don't want to. And it's just a lot of tricky parts with getting people to use curricula, or I don't know, to teach in anti-racist ways, to center that sort of thing. But I don't know, what experience have you had? Because I happen to be in circles, and I actually will try to pull myself outside of these circles. So I'm making sure I'm keeping a pulse on everything that's going on. But I'm in a lot of circles where people will want to use your curriculum, or want to teach in anti-racist ways. But what thoughts do you have on buy-in, or how to, I don't know, get?
Well, I don't understand the word buy-in. I don't use it. That's another word that was constructed by people who did not look like me and go through what I go through.
Exactly.
I didn't meet my partner and say, I'm really waiting for you to buy into loving me, or I'm not waiting for my best friend to for her to buy into sisterhood. I mean, are we buying into, I only use buy-in in capitalistic language when I'm buying something,
right?
Like a car, or, a bottle of water. I don't know. I don't think we buy into lives. And if you don't want to do something that children need, you don't want to, it doesn't make you happy, then go do something that makes you happy. I think everybody deserves joy. If teaching our children what they need doesn't give you joy, then ask what will. So, this idea of buy-in, I don't get it. I feel like we only use it when it comes to giving Black children what they need, or brown children what they need.
Same.
So, we should be asking, do I feel ashamed that I need to get buy-in? Because if you need to get buy-in to someone's life, you may need to feel some shame. And that's a good thing if you feel shame, because maybe you'll do something better.
Yeah. One of my biggest takeaways from the last year I was there, was when maybe this next to last, it was last year because the pandemic came, but months before the pandemic, for years, they talked about this buy-in stuff. And, I was doing some things with some other colleagues at the adult level, because I'm like, the adults need work on themselves too. And growth and all of this. And then, there was some anti-racist, we were doing this really good meetings and discussions and all of that. And then it got down to, everybody was going to have a turn sharing a case. And then, it was getting to some who just were holding out and not wanting to. And I had a supervisor pull me aside and say, well, Samantha, why don't you just, they're never going to get on board. Why don't you just, maybe see about, just don't worry about these two. And I was like, what, excuse me, like it caught me so off guard. At the end of the day, it's like way past time to go. And I'm like, are you really stopping me to suggest that you're a supervisor, like you're a division head, you have more power. You can say to them, we're all participating because that's what you guys said at the beginning of the year. This is not optional. We're all doing this. And now you're suggesting that. And she's like, you're never going to get everybody on board. And I'm like, I'm not, that's not going to come from me. I am going to hold everybody accountable. But anyway, what was interesting was months later when the same person, when the pandemic happened, and we realized that the school was going to close, we wouldn't be coming back, and people started mumbling and complaining about, because we didn't know how serious it was, but we knew we'd have to do some remote teaching. And some complaining happened, and this same person stood up there and said, well, there's no need for that. This has to happen. We don't have a choice. This has to happen. So there's no need for complaining. We're doing this. And I thought to myself, wait, what just happened? Yeah, you mean there are certain things that have to happen? Like you actually can make certain things happen. So I fully agree. And so it totally happens, this whole notion of buy-in at the expense of people that look like me or look like you or our Black and brown kids. So anyway.
Yeah, we can replace it with love. It's that simple.
Yes. Okay. So last thing before the little 30-second things is Pharrell. You mentioned at the Boston thing that you'd be doing some work with Pharrell, and then I saw a thing on LinkedIn. So can you talk about like what kind of things, what you guys are working on? I feel like I can't even remember the last time that I can think of, or ever, like a big name, somebody with a producer or musician with as big as Pharrell was partnering with something education related. So yeah, I'm excited.
He's a big education advocate. He's super intelligent and genius. I mean, when it comes to educational stuff.
Yeah.
And I'm like, do you have your degrees in education? Because you talk like a scholar in the field who studied this. But, I've worked with him and his mother and his school.
Yellow Cab. He has a school?
Yeah. He opened a school in his hometown, and I've worked with the staff there. It's an amazing group of educators, and they're taking up my model. And him and I have, just had conversations about education where I introduced my model to him and showed him some examples and things like that. And so we're continuing to build curriculum. We have some curriculum things coming up, and it's been exciting. We were on this Google Ad Color event together, just talking about education and joy and the things that schools need. Yeah.
That's awesome. Because I wonder if there's a way, I don't know, that he this keeps going, it can, I don't know, from one Black sister to another. I'm excited. It's bigger and bigger for you.
Yeah, no, it's going, right. I just finished yesterday writing a Bisa Butler curriculum, and I sent it to her this morning. We'll be on a session together. I enjoy working with artists in the artistry of Pharrell Williams and Bisa Butler, because I feel like my curriculum writing is like my art. And so lots of exciting things and great people.
Awesome. Okay. So we've come to the last part, and then I'll let you go.
Okay.
And yeah, so we'll start with CRT.
Okay, I'm likely going to take all the 30 seconds because I'm long-winded, but I know I got to go to another event. So CRT, CRT, when I think of CRT, it's a theory. Theories are explanations that have been studied across time that help to explain phenomena. And in this case, it is a theory that helps to explain why people are mistreated, oppressed, marginalized due to their race. Like theories, we need theories in the world to help explain circumstances, history, and present day.
Perfect. I also think CRT, this whole critical race theory thing that gets me so bothered, or used to anyway, is I wish we would go back to what it was, culturally responsive teaching once. And I wish people would see CRT as meaning that again. Okay. Court cases that have been in the news. Go.
It's been a lot recently about racial injustice. I feel like the last two court cases more recently has been where, one person gets to live their life and go off free from killing people. And, I just think about Trayvon Martin, who didn't get to live. And it's a constant fight. We should not have to fight so much for people to love us and to not kill because of the color of our skins. So I'll just say that. I know my
Couldn't
time.
agree more. I was so mad with the Rittenhouse, which I prefer to call Rottenhouse. But I was so glad that justice prevailed in the other case. Okay. What about okay. King Richard, did you see? I'm sorry, I started and stopped.
No, it's okay. I'll go fast. I saw King Richard. I know there's a lot of pushback at first of why they get Will Smith to play. I think he did a phenomenal job. And I thought the two young girls, actors, did a phenomenal job. It is an amazing story. The Williams sisters are just so gifted and genius. And it was a great, it was a great time watching their story. Or one of their stories. I'm sure we all have many.
Yes, I was amazed that he had this plan. He reminded me of Noah from the Bible. It's like, I know what's coming, like how the flood was coming. He's like, I know what they need, and I know how to. I watched so many interviews on him afterwards. He was a genius that should have been treasured, but they blackmail. Confident black males don't get the what they deserve. We can skip dressing because you already told me you made some. Social media. I will wrap up. I will let you just choose any of these last three, maybe Taboo and Spades, because I have kept you and I appreciate you, but you can pick either of those last three bullets.
Okay, I think I'm gonna go with Taboo or Spades for 200. I will beat anybody who is at the table in either one. And that's
listen.
Okay.
My son, who's 9, we met some new neighbors in the neighborhood and they invited us over and they said they were doing Taboo. He's like, Mommy, please don't.
Oh, I have friends who want to play Taboo with me. They're like, you just take all the joy out. And I'm like,
listen, don't play with me with Taboo.
I know. I love Taboo because I love language and I love words.
Same. Okay. Well, Gholdy, thank you so much for just hanging out with me and being on the show. And I can't wait for people to hear it and just like learn more about who you are and learn more about your framework. When this airs, I'll put, I'll add some stuff that so they can see what the framework is.
Oh, okay,
don't know. Cool. I'll edit some of that in. And yeah, is there anything? I'll let you have like any last word you want for like, I don't know.
No, I mean, just thank you for creating this space that you do to talk about these issues and you make it fun and interesting. I think we need more like it. So thank you.
All right, friends. Well, we will wrap up. And thanks again, Gholdy, for being on the show.
Thank you. I'll see you next time.